This week, one of the things that's been in the news, one of the better things that's been in the news, let me clarify, is the crew of the Artemis II rocket ship went up and orbited the moon. They traveled deeper into space than any other human beings have. That's pretty neat. It must take not only a lot of skill and knowledge to complete a mission like that, but it's going to take a little bit of prayer and luck, I bet. Probably, hopefully more prayer than luck. But I guess my point is there are so many points in that mission where things could go wrong. It's dangerous. It's dangerous to blast off with all that firepower underneath, all that explosiveness to send a rocket into orbit. It's dangerous. It's dangerous when you get in space, and if there's even the smallest leak, it could be disaster. Apparently, it's particularly dangerous when they come back to Earth. If they don't get things just right, they could end up off in space, lost forever. It's dangerous. I was thinking about something about a quote that's often been attributed to astronaut John Glenn, who was the first person to orbit the Earth. He was often asked what he was thinking about as they were counting down. As he was sitting in his ship and they were launching, what was he thinking about? He said, "As I hurtled through space, one thought kept crossing my mind. Every part of this rocket ship was provided by the lowest bidder." I don't think that's confidence inspiring. Every part supplied by the lowest bidder. We applaud the bravery and the drive of those who go on such great adventures. But the truth is, life is an adventure. We're all living adventures. And life itself, just ordinary, everyday life, often has much to fear. Like most of you, during my life, I've experienced fear and uncertainty. In life, we experience loss, financial difficulties, relationship difficulties, health difficulties. We have doubts and fears about what will happen, what we should do, how we will accomplish things that don't seem possible. When I was a young adult, I once went bungee jumping. They tied a stretchy rope to my ankles and took me up to 180 feet and had me jump. 185 feet, I lean out and I jump. Funny thing is, when I consider my life and I think about my biggest fears and scariest situations and times of doubt, bungee jumping doesn't really make the top 10. Life brings with it its challenges, things to be afraid of, things to worry about, things to be anxious about. We think of these big, dangerous little things, and yet all our lives are filled with things to be worried about. Life is its own adventure with dangers great and small. And in our scripture today, the disciples were facing danger. They were facing their fears. They were facing their doubts. Their fear was real. The danger really was there. And their doubt, well, doubt is simply uncertainty of what we're not able to see. Uncertainty about what's going to happen and what will happen and how things will turn out. Last week, we celebrated the resurrection of Jesus. The disciples had seen Jesus arrested. They had seen him beaten. They had seen him crucified. They had seen him dead and buried. Then on that amazing Sunday morning, the tomb was empty. The women were saying he had risen, and they had seen him. At some point, he also appeared to Peter. There was hope. But there was still much to fear. There was still much to doubt. And all of that brings us to our scripture today. Let's look at John chapter 20. And let's begin with verse 19. On the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed him his hands and his side, and the disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Let's pause there for a second. The disciples were hiding. They were behind locked doors. They were afraid. They were worried that the Jewish leaders would come for them. Their fear was real. They had followed Jesus, and they arrested Jesus and crucified him. And so they hid behind locked doors. They were trying to keep out those who might hurt them. It's a very ordinary human thing to do. Their hearts had been shaken. Their friend, their leader, the one whom they put all their hope, had been crucified. And now their future was uncertain. They had left everything behind to follow Jesus. What now? Their circumstances were kind of unique, but we can still relate to them. Many of us have experienced the fear that comes after a loss. We've experienced confusion after disappointment. We've all had those what now moments. It's a little bit like a team that's just lost a championship in a heartbreaking fashion, and everyone sits in the locker room in silence. No one knows what to say. That's where the disciples were on the evening of the resurrection. And what happens next changes everything. You see, Jesus meets us in our fears. He shows up, and his words are as profound today as they were to the disciples. Peace be with you. Those are Jesus' words. Peace be with you. It didn't matter that the doors were locked. It didn't matter that they were hiding away in fear. Locked doors aren't a barrier to Jesus. He came to them. He didn't wait for them to come out of hiding. He didn't wait for their fear to subside. He didn't wait for them to calm themselves and get it all together. He came to them while they were locked in alone. He came to them. He doesn't wait for us to come out to him. He comes in and he finds us and he comes to us. And his first words were not a rebuke. He didn't show up and say, "Hey, where'd you guys go when they took me away?" He didn't say, "Where were you guys when they were crucifying me and you were off hiding?" He came and he said, "Peace be with you." His presence changes the atmosphere. And it says in verse 20, their fear gave way to joy. Jesus changes things. He changes the atmosphere of our lives. He helps to turn our fears into joy. You know, last week on Monday, we had Easter Sunday, and the next day, it snowed a bunch. The week began dark and dreary, feeling like winter. It just didn't want to end. But by the end of the week, the sun was shining, and it was over 50 degrees. Jesus is that moment when the sun comes out and everything changes. What are you thinking? Side note, maybe it was Tuesday it snowed. Anyway, we got snow at the beginning of the week, and by the end of the week, the sun was out and it's 50 degrees. That's kind of what it was like when one moment they're hiding in fear, and then suddenly there's the Son of God and everything changes. Jesus meets us in our anxiety. He meets us in our doubts. He meets us in our grief. And his words are, "Peace be with you." You don't have to fix yourself before you come to Jesus. He comes to us first. He meets us where we are. then he changes our lives. So often, people are right that I've met people who say, I'm too far gone. I'll clean my life up and then I'll turn to Jesus. Well, that's backwards. Turn to Jesus and he'll clean your life up. And then the other mistake I've seen people make is, well, Jesus accepts me as I am. And that's true, but he doesn't want to leave you there. He loves you too much to leave you in a mess. He wants to do a good work in your life. Jesus doesn't just calm the disciples' fears. He gives them a future. And he does the same thing for us. Let's look at the next couple of verses, picking up in verse 21. Again, Jesus said, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you. And with that, he breathed on them. He said, receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive their sins, they are not forgiven. Every time I read this passage, I find myself really pausing and my mind going off on a tangent. Just on this little phrase, he breathed on them. I know in the Greek, it uses the word pneuma, which means the same thing as the Hebrew ruach. I probably pronounced them a little wrong, but I'm from Maine. But the breath of God, the ruach Elohim, the pneuma, the spirit, the breath. Because you see, the words spirit and breath are often translated from the same words. We can look back to Genesis. And the ruach Elohim was going out across the deep. The breath of God that brings to life creation. The breath of God. And so it's so fitting and it means something so powerful when it says Jesus breathed on them. Jesus sends us with a purpose. As the Father sent me, so I am sending you, he says. The disciples went from hiding to being sent. They went from being locked inside their fears to now being commissioned to go out to a world that doesn't always want to hear what they have to say. But they don't go alone. They were empowered by his Spirit. He breathed on them. The creative force of God, the breath of God was upon them. And it does bring this echo of Genesis, because what God is doing is something new. It is a new creation. In fact, what he is doing in their lives is they are becoming a new creation. When we come to Jesus, we, in a sense, are recreated. He enables us to more fully be who he created us to be. He gave them a mission of forgiveness. They were to carry the message of reconciliation between God and humanity. Sin had separated God from his people. Jesus came to reunite them. And he sends us too. We're called to carry out the same mission the disciples were. Our story isn't over. Our calling, your calling, it's not canceled by fear. It's not canceled by doubt. Because you see that amazing breath of God, the Spirit of God, it's available to us too. You are sent. You're sent to your family, your place of work, your community. You and I, we have a mission. But not everyone finds faith easy. Let's look at the rest of John chapter 20, picking up with verse 24. Before I read that, I want to remind you of something. You see, Thomas, we always remember his doubt, but there's another spot in John where the disciples are getting ready to go to Jerusalem, and they know going to Jerusalem's dangerous. The religious leaders are out to get Jesus. They know if they go to Jerusalem, they might kill Jesus. They might kill them. And Thomas is the one who speaks up in that passage and says, "Let us go to Jerusalem that we may die with him." There was at least a moment in Thomas's life where he was full of gumption for Jesus. I just want to remind you of that before we get into talking about doubting Thomas. So again, John chapter 20, verse 24. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my fingers where the nails were, and put my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand. Put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe." And Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Jesus came to Thomas in all his doubt. Thomas was just being honest. He told him, "Unless I see it for myself, how can I believe?" Thomas wasn't being rebellious. He was simply wrestling with doubt. And he was honest with the other disciples about it. If truth be told, he probably was voicing what other people were thinking. And then Thomas meets Jesus personally. Thomas had missed out on it the first time Jesus came to the disciples. So guess what? Jesus made a special trip and he came back just for Thomas, I think. He came back to him and he invites him. He's saying by his actions, "I hear your doubts. Come and touch. Feel it yourself. Come and see with your own eyes. See the truth for yourself." And Thomas's doubt turns to proclaiming the truth. "My Lord and my God." It was just something he had to see himself. It seemed too good to be true. And then Jesus meets Thomas in the middle of his doubt. How about us? Jesus isn't afraid of our questions. Doubt can actually be a doorway rather than a dead end. The question is, what do we do with our doubt? When we bring our doubts to him and not away from him, we'll find Jesus even in the middle of our doubt. If we seek Jesus and let him reveal himself to us, we will find him. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed." I think that's talking about us all these years later. We weren't eyewitness accounts of the resurrection. But I hope we can be eyewitness accounts of the resurrected Jesus. We may not physically see Jesus, but we see how he has changed everything. It's like the wind. We believe in the wind. We can't see the wind. But you know what we can see? We can see how the wind moves the trees. We can see how it blows around anything in its path. We can see the effects of the wind. We can see what the wind does. And so it is with Jesus. We see the work of Jesus in people's lives. We see the work of God in creation and in the lives of his people. And we can look back at our lives and see his work in our life. We see how he changes people's lives. In verse 31, we get this final reminder. We don't know everything Jesus has done, but he has revealed enough to us so that we might believe and live. You know, later in their lives, I don't think the disciples spent much time together. They kind of went off in their separate directions, and everybody but John ended up being killed for their faith. And John, they imprisoned him and exiled him and tried to kill him, and he's the only one who lived to old age. But if they had been able to gather together and talk about the old days, I bet they would be full of stories about things Jesus said and things Jesus did that we don't know about. And maybe that's appropriate. Maybe it's because each of them deserves some private moments with God. And so do we. We don't know everything Jesus did. We don't know everything he said. But we do know some of the things he did and some of the things he said. We know enough to know who he is and what he has done. He's revealed enough to us so that we may believe and live. Because you see, believing, faith, it leads to life. Not just belief, but transformation. When Christ comes into our lives, he doesn't just fill our head with knowledge. He changes our hearts. He transforms us. Each and every human being born on this world is created in the image of God with potential. And with Jesus, that potential begins to be fulfilled. God not only knows who you are and loves you, but he knows who you can be with him. Faith leads to life and transformation. As for us, our faith is not blind, it is grounded in truth. Jesus invites us, he invites you, he invites me, he invites us to trust him fully. Real life, abundant life is found in him, and the disciples' fear and doubt was valid. It was real. But when Jesus called them, they went. What changed? The presence of Jesus. They were the same disciples. They were in the same world, facing the same dangers, but everything was different because Jesus was alive and he had come to them, and their lives would never be the same. They went from fear to peace, from hiding to being sent, from doubt to faith. Why? Because Jesus lives. And so the question is, where are we today? Where are you today? Maybe it's hiding behind locked doors. Maybe you're wrestling with doubt. Maybe you're feeling unsure of your purpose. Maybe you're just struggling with the normal things human beings struggle with and say, I wish I knew how this would turn out. Jesus comes to us. He makes a special trip to each one of us. He stands in the middle of our situations. And he says, peace be with you. There are a lot of things in this world to fear, to cause anxiety, things that we could struggle with. We're going to have moments of saying, Lord, I believe, but I don't know how this is going to happen or that is going to happen. We can struggle with doubt. And yet, in the midst of all of those things, Jesus' words to us are no different than the disciples. He comes to us and he says, peace be with you. Let's sing one more song this morning. And Jesus said, peace be with you. God bless you and enjoy your afternoon.